My name is Mike Lehnert. I serve on the board of the Traverse City International Affairs Forum. IAF is a formal program of our Northwestern Michigan College. IAF has served the community for over a quarter century by informing us and increasing our understanding of global events and issues. We strive to educate and to inspire. Tonight, we have something quite different from our normal programming. Last March, America lost a beloved citizen in Vice Admiral John Currier. John was a board member of IAF and active in our community. He was quiet, generous, self-effacing, and thoughtful. It was not until his passing many of us discovered we had been in the presence of a legend. As a young man, John was the recipient of the Harmon International Aviation Trophy. This award is given annually to only one person in the world, and some years it is not presented at all. Other names you may recognize who have received this award include Charles Lindbergh, Jimmy Doolittle, Chuck Yeager, Curtis LeMay, Amelia Earhart, and James Lovell. John rose in the Coast Guard to serve with distinction as the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard, the second highest post in his service. After retirement, he and his wife, Mary Jane, moved to Traverse City, a place they had grown to love during an earlier tour. We are fortunate to have located the exit interview John gave to the Coast Guard just before retiring. In it, he describes the events that led to his being awarded the Harmon Trophy. You will get a sense of his character when you watch that interview. John was a giver and a planner. He always looked for ways to make the world better. And after his passing, his wife, Mary Jane, told us that one of his goals was to help the Northwestern Michigan College Aviation program. This summer, in accordance with his wishes, Mary Jane created a scholarship fund in John's name. Its purpose is to help NMC aviation students achieve their dreams. Any donations raised during this IAF event will go to that fund. It is our way of recognizing a true friend and a great American. You can find a link to make a donation in the chat function on your screen. We would like to thank our loyal IAF members for their support to help making programming possible. These IAF events add value to our lives, educate us, and they connect our community to the world. Our IAF members make that happen. We are joined virtually tonight from all over the country by those who call John their friend, and we welcome them as well. As a final housekeeping note, you may ask questions at any time using the chat function. You can submit those to all panelists. We will allow time at the end of the presentation to answer as many questions as possible. Joining me tonight is Captain Chuck Webb, United States Coast Guard. Some of you may know Chuck as the commanding officer of the U.S. Coast Guard Air Station here in Traverse City. Chuck, welcome, and thanks to you and your team for your service to our community.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a true honor to be part of this great event.
Well, thank you, Chuck, and I want to tell you, all of you, that Admiral Currier's entire family is also with us, including his wife, Mary Jane, sons, Andrew and Ben, and even John's parents, Jan and Bill Currier, who are watching from Maine. Welcome. The first order of business is to give our audience an appreciation of the magnitude of John's accomplishments by talking about the role of the Coast Guard in search and rescue. Many of us who enjoy the Great Lakes take the Coast Guard mission for granted. That is, until we get in trouble. Captain Chuck Webb is going to help us here. Chuck, can you tell us a little bit about the mission of the Coast Guard here in Traverse City?
Yes, sir. And I would start it right out with looking at this emblem behind us. That's our unit patch. And I'm sure a lot of people can't read what it says, but at the bottom, it says Guardians of the Great Lakes. And that's what we are. That is our primary mission. Our primary mission is for search and rescue. We are here for the need of any mariners on the Great Lakes in their time of distress. And we do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have an aircraft and crew ready to go at all times. That is our primary mission. Now, there are 10 other statutory missions that the Coast Guard has, and I won't go through them all, but they're things like ports and waterways and coastal security, drug interdiction, aids to navigation. And this air station also has a role in each of those statutory missions. Now, different varying levels that we perform each of them, but we do touch each one of those missions. Our AOR, our area of responsibility, covers Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, and the northern half of Lake Huron. And then we have an air station in Detroit that covers the remaining Great Lakes. And we can interact with each other. And depending on the requirements, there may be times that I'll find one of my aircraft in Air Station Detroit's area of responsibility, just because we're either helping out or we may be a better tool for the job that's required. Beyond just working in our area of responsibility, we also, this past summer, we deployed 4 times to the Gulf Coast, sending an aircraft and crew down for the hurricanes. So lots of responsibility here at this air station, and this unit is always ready to go. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Chuck. How about talking to us a little bit about your international role as well? Because obviously your area of responsibility joins that of Canadian international waters.
Yes, sir, it certainly does. We share a lot of border with Canada through Lake Superior and Lake Huron. And we support Canada in their time of need. So if they request our help, we will be there. And perfect example is earlier this fall, we were over in Lake Huron, deep in Canadian waters, rescuing a kayaker that was injured. And so we medevac that kayaker out of there. We also, I talked about other missions beyond search and rescue that the Coast Guard does. We also do those. I had the privilege to be stationed here in Traverse City for my first Coast Guard air station 20 years ago. And when I was here then, I did a mission where I had to fly well up into Canada for a Great Lakes carrier that was loaded improperly and had a structural failure. And I was up there taking pictures and assessing whether or not there was any kind of marine environmental pollution situation. So we have much interaction with Canada, and that's just aviation. There's much more on the surface that I won't go into. But in the same token, Canada provides us help as well. We don't have fixed wing assets here for the Coast Guard on the Great Lakes, but the Canadians do over in Trenton, Ontario. And if there are times we need fixed wing support, we will ask them, and they generally always provide and help us out with fixed wing. And so beyond Canada, there's another piece, the Great Lakes, with all the carriers that and freighters that transit our waters. We have a lot of international ships and people, and if they're in need, we will be there for them also. And there have been some, very well-known incidents that have happened on the Great Lakes at this air station with foreign flag carriers that this air station has supported in the past.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. Without going into any sea stories, I once ran the Cuban migrant camps in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And during that time, we had about 80,000 Cuban and Haitian migrants who had attempted to make the crossing between Cuba and Haiti and mainland Florida. And many of those migrants told me that others, in addition to the 80,000 we had perished in a terrible storm in the straits between Cuba and Florida. And those that survived told me about losing family members and their joy at being rescued when they saw that Coast Guard cutter coming or that helo coming to rescue them. Can you talk a little bit more about the Coast Guard's role in international rescue?
Yes, sir. This is a large, complex topic, our international role. And just like we do for Canada, if they ask for help, we're there in times of need, and it's no different anywhere else around the globe. And I'll try to boil it down and simplify it the best I can. And the way I kind of see it is we can respond in about 3 ways, whether it's full force, partial force, or in a coordinating effort. And what I mean by those, when I talk full force, that would be looking at your example, where we actually had cutters and aircraft that could rescue the people and pull them out of the water right there. So when we look at the migrant crisis that went on and all those people we rescued, we had full force right there to help. Now, we could get into a partial force situation, and that would be where, the Coast Guard just doesn't have assets, but maybe we can get a long-range surveillance plane like a C-130 out there. And I can give you a perfect example. When I flew C-130s many years ago, I remember being 1,500 miles off the coast of the U.S. in the North Atlantic, trying to rescue one person in a sailboat. It was from France. And of course, in a 130, we couldn't pull him out of the water, but we were able to divert a Russian freighter on scene to get them. So there's a partial force sense. And then the other one would be where the Coast Guard just can't get to, but our coordinating centers can still help run it and possibly find a freighter or some kind of vessel in the area, wherever it may be, the Southern Pacific, Northern Atlantic, whatever, or wherever it may be, but they can do the coordination and get that asset on scene to try to help out.
You know, isn't it amazing that nationalities don't seem to make much difference when you're either rescuing people or looking for help from other countries?
No, nationalities don't matter whatsoever. If there's a mariner in need, we're going to be there.
Thank you, Chuck. You know, I understand that the use of aviation in search and rescue for the Coast Guard can be traced all the way back to 1916. Can you tell me anything about those years? Not that you were there, of course.
Well, I can talk a little bit on it, and I don't want to go too much because we could talk all day about it. But you know, the Coast Guard has a very rich history of pioneering the use of aircraft from the time of 1916 to be used for our missions. And you know, the success that we have today is all from their vision of our forefathers. And you know, our first aviator was Elmer Stone, and Coast Guard aviators celebrate his birthday every year, still to this day. And it was just this past Friday, and we celebrated it. And that continued as a helicopter came along. And then our forefathers there, the visionaries, Frank Erickson and Stuart Graham. Coast Guard's always been interested in it, and from search and rescue and those other missions. And what I would do is, if people want to learn more about it, I would strongly encourage them to go to the Coast Guard Aviation Association website. There is a great rundown of the history of Coast Guard aviation on there. But one thing I would like to bring up is bringing this back to the Great Lakes and Canada. In 1940, the Coast Guard actually sent an aircraft here for 3 months to Traverse City before this air station existed to assess where they should put a Coast Guard air station on the Great Lakes. And in that first month, heck, in the first few weeks it was here, they already did a rescue. Just by chance, they were flying by a vessel in the water, saw that they were in distress. The seas were out of control, but they still were able to land and do some, or land in the water and do some heroic things using life jackets because they couldn't get close enough to the vessel to rescue the two people. And just with the report from the two survivors that they picked up, I'll read it here. This comes from the Coast Guard Journal. Before disembarking from the plane and departing for their homes in Mackinac City, the fortunate survivors stated, "We thought the water was too rough for the plane to land. We saw it circle in the air and thought it was going to leave us. In a few more moments, we would have been ready to take a deep breath and give up the struggle." So that, best I can tell, was the very first Coast Guard aviation rescue on the Great Lakes. And within a few weeks later, we actually did a rescue in Canada. That same crew flew deep into Canadian territory to rescue a hunter that was badly burned, and they flew him 750 miles to Milwaukee.
Well, thanks, Chuck. Last question I have for you is just how do you put together, I know you've talked a lot about Coast Guard cutters and aviation. How do you work the two together to make the right decisions on when you have a boater out there in the Great Lakes in trouble?
Yes, sir. Well, the first one is we train. We train all the time, and we train with our boat crews, and we work on joint operations there. But the other piece that goes with it is we have command centers, and there are 4 on the Great Lakes where we sector up our AORs, and those command centers are in charge of their AOR. And when we're working a case, they are jointly coordinating the surface and the aviation assets. So we can provide the best possible response there is to whatever the case may be, and try to do it in the with the least amount of risk.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. You know, I'm really impressed by what the Coast Guard does. I hope I never meet you professionally when I'm out fishing on the water out there, but I'm sure glad you're here. For those of you who have never been on a boat in trouble, you know, it's tough to appreciate the difficulty involved in getting a crew off a sinking ship. But to give you a better appreciation of the danger, before we get into talking about John, we've got a video of a Coast Guard rescue. And this is one from the Alaskan Monarch. The Alaskan Monarch was a crabber on its way to St. Paul, Alaska. It had 100,000 pounds of crab, and it got trapped in the ice. And 4 of the 6 crewmen were safely recovered by a Coast Guard helo using a basket to take them off the stricken ship. But the captain and the engineer stayed on board, hoping that the Monarch could be towed out of the ice floe by the Coast Guard cutter Storis. However, when the Monarch went aground, the captain realized the ship was lost and he asked for a rescue. And we're going to pick that video up there to show you what happened next.
It's the dead of winter in the Bering Sea. The Alaskan Monarch, a 96-foot crabber, is trapped in an ice pack off St. Paul Island. Loaded with 100,000 pounds of crab, headed into port to offload its fresh catch. The Monarch is being pushed closer and closer towards the rocky shoreline. With a damaged propulsion system, the Monarch is unable to maneuver, helpless as it's battered by 10 to 15-foot icy waves. The cutter Storis, the only Coast Guard vessel stationed in Alaska that's capable of penetrating the heavy ice, is already on scene. The Storis plan: save the people by saving the boat. Get a tow line onto the bow and tow the Monarch out of the ice. Unfortunately, the Storis, while ice capable, cannot get close enough to pass a line easily. The Monarch is well into shallow water, and if the Storis gets too close, it too will be in danger. The crew of the Storis attempts to shoot a messenger line across Monarch's bow 150 feet away. If their efforts are successful, they will pass increasingly larger lines until the tow line is passed. Despite several attempts, they have yet to get a line to the ship intact. A Coast Guard H-3 helicopter from Air Station Kodiak, 500 miles away, arrives on scene, but because of the long flight is already low on fuel. Complicating the situation, the Monarch is drifting closer into shore, positioning it even further from the Storis and putting the crew in even greater peril. A decision is made to use the helicopter to hoist the Monarch crewmen to safety.
We had one suit washed overboard, so we're going to have one fellow that has to have a survival suit. He's saying it's for different person, over. Roger, roger. We're coming in for a pitch now, skipper.
The Coast Guard, in communication with the ship's master, learns that one crewman does not have a survival suit. It had already been washed overboard. It's determined that he will be the first to be hoisted. The hoist is executed without incident, and the next 3 hoists are also successful. Four of the 6 Monarch crewmen are now safely on board the Coast Guard helicopter. But time has run out. The Monarch is hard aground and breaking apart. As the master and chief engineer start across the deck, the captain slips, falling to his hands and knees. The engineer stops to help him just as a large wave breaks across the ship's beam, sweeping them both into the freezing water. Time is now critical. The crewmen can now be crushed by blocks of ice or trapped by the Monarch itself as it continues to be pummeled by waves and ice. The helo crew must act quickly. The flight mechanic lowers the basket again, hoping against hope that the fishermen can climb in. Miraculously, the chief engineer, anxious to escape the freezing waters, gathers strength and pulls himself into the basket. Once he has been hoisted, the basket is lowered again. But the captain is trapped. A block of ice sits on top of his chest. He cannot get into the basket. The helicopter inches forward until finally the captain can free himself from the ice and climb into the basket. Minutes later, the helicopter and 6 Monarch crewmen are en route to the clinic on St. Paul Island. Although the captain and chief engineer are both suffering from hypothermia, they will all recover completely and are thankful to be alive. It's the dead of winter in the Bering Sea. The Alaskan Monarch, a 96-foot crabber, is trapped in an ice pack off St. Paul Island. Loaded with 100,000 pounds of crab, headed into port to offload its fresh catch. The Monarch is being pushed closer and closer towards the rocky shoreline. With a damaged propulsion system, the Monarch is unable to maneuver, helpless as it's battered by 10 to 15-foot icy waves. The cutter Storis, the only Coast Guard vessel stationed in Alaska that's capable of penetrating the heavy ice, is already on scene. The Storis plan, save the people by saving the boat. Get a tow line onto the bow and tow the Monarch out of the ice. Unfortunately, the Storis, while ice capable, cannot get close enough to pass a line easily. The Monarch is well into shallow water, and if the Storis gets too close, it too will be in danger. The crew of the Storis attempts to shoot a messenger line across Monarch's bow 150 feet away. If their efforts are successful, they will pass increasingly larger lines until the tow line is passed. Despite several attempts, they have yet to get a line to the ship intact. A Coast Guard H-3 helicopter from Air Station Kodiak, 500 miles away, arrives on scene, but because of the long flight is already low on fuel. Complicating the situation, the Monarch is drifting closer into shore, positioning it even further from the Storis and putting the crew in even greater peril. A decision is made to use the helicopter to hoist the Monarch crewmen to safety.
We had one suit washed overboard, so we're going to have one fellow that doesn't have a survival suit. He's saying it's for different person, over. Roger, roger. We're coming in for approach now, skipper.
The Coast Guard, in communication with the ship's master, learns that one crewman does not have a survival suit. It had already been washed overboard. It's determined that he will be the first to be hoisted. The hoist is executed without incident, and the next 3 hoists are also successful. Four of the 6 Monarch crewmen are now safely on board the Coast Guard helicopter. But time has run out. The Monarch is hard aground and breaking apart. As the master and chief engineer start across the deck, the captain slips, falling to his hands and knees. The engineer stops to help him just as a large wave breaks across the ship's beam, sweeping them both into the freezing water. Time is now critical. crewmen can now be crushed by blocks of ice or trapped by the Monarch itself as it continues to be pummeled by waves and ice. The helo crew must act quickly. The flight mechanic lowers the basket again, hoping against hope that the fishermen can climb in. Miraculously, the chief engineer, anxious to escape the freezing waters, gathers strength and pulls himself into the basket. Once he has been hoisted, the basket is lowered again. But the captain is trapped. A block of ice sits on top of his chest. He cannot get into the basket. The helicopter inches forward until finally the captain can free himself from the ice and climb into the basket. Minutes later, the helicopter and 6 Monarch crewmen are en route to the clinic on St. Paul Island. Although the captain and chief engineer are both suffering from hypothermia, they will all recover completely and are thankful to be alive.
I'd like to add that the helo pilot in command was Lieutenant Laura Guth. And yes, the Coast Guard has female pilots and they get the same missions that the men do. Chuck, is there anything you want to add to give our audience a better appreciation of what they just saw?
Yes, sir. First, I would say, before I get into it, is that aircraft that you saw there was the same type of aircraft, an H-3, that Admiral Currier was flying when he received, well, the case that he received the Harmon International Aviation Trophy for. And so, talking about the case itself, just watching it, I'll be honest, I'm glad I wasn't the one having to fly that case. That was harrowing. What that crew was up against, they showed up on scene with a plan, hoisting the people off the deck, but when the final 2 crew members went in the water, that changed the dynamic of the entire case. And that crew had to come up with a plan on the spot immediately, trying to figure out what they were going to do with the stress of being low fuel and with the stress of just being able to lower a basket and helplessly watch, waiting to see if the people in the water could get in that basket. That had to be a stressful case.
Thanks, Chuck. I got cold just watching that clip. To learn more about John, we also have a short video clip from an old friend of his, Captain Mark D'Andrea. Mark worked for John when he commanded the 13th Coast Guard District. This district has responsibility for the entire Pacific Northwest. And Mark is going to tell you a little bit more about what it was like to work for John and his innovative style of leadership.
Hi, I'm Mark D'Andrea. I worked with Admiral John Currier from 2007 to 2009 when he was the commander of Coast Guard District 13 based out of Seattle, Washington. During that time, he helped establish the Shipwriter program. In this program, teams from both the U.S. Coast Guard and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police formed the teams on each other's vessels. For instance, on a U.S. Coast Guard boat based out of Bellingham, Washington, Royal Canadian Mounted Police would be assigned to ride with our Coast Guard team. When they engaged a U.S. vessel, the U.S. Coast Guard led the team on the boarding and was supported by Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Vice versa, when they engaged a Canadian boat along the border, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police led the team with U.S. Coast Guard backup. In theory, this is a simple thing and makes a lot of sense. However, because of the sensitivities of each nation's laws, rules, and regulations, a lot of diplomatic work had to be completed. John Currier led that work. He established relationships all up and down the chain of command with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police superintendents in the area, the Canadian consul, the governors of Washington, the U.S. Border Patrol chiefs, and formed teams that were outstanding. Had he not had the ability to establish those relationships, Shipwriter would still be languishing. John Currier was an exceptional diplomat and a visionary, and he will be sadly missed.
Chuck, is there anything else that you want to tell us about Admiral Currier? You know, you commanded here for a time when he and Mary Jane were with us, and just wanted to know if there's anything you wanted to add there.
Sure. Yes, sir. You know, first I would say I was blessed to be able to know him. And when you look at him as a leader, you know, he was a people person, a servant leader, whatever, however you want to call it, but he cared about people. And, you know, my first exposure to him when he was then Captain Currier down at our district headquarters in Cleveland. And I was here, my first tour, Ensign Webb. And people spoke about him. He was already legendary. You know, I heard about this, I guess I would say, mystical legend in the Coast Guard, Captain Currier, and then I finally met him, and I could totally see why. You know, he cared so much about people. Sometimes, you know, our rescues that we do on the Great Lakes may not be worthy of an award, but he wanted everyone to understand he appreciated what they did and he recognized it. And he actually created, and I still wear it to this day. It's one of the reasons we're wearing this flight suit. But right there's a pin, and it's a SAR Team 9 pin. And it was created by him to let all those crews know around the Great Lakes that did a rescue that may not have been recognized by an award, that he did care and he recognized it. You know, and moving on, you know, I would describe him just a man of class, really mature class. When I was fortunate enough to come back here and take command, the first person that spoke to me once I got off the stage was Admiral Currier. And he came up to me and he said, "That was a great speech. I just want you to know I'm here for you anytime. And if you'd like, I'd really like to get together with you for coffee at some point." And fortunately, I did get to have some of those sessions with him, and his advice and counsel, you know, coming from the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard to a 05 CO. I mean, it was just incredible. It's just an opportunity not many people have. And it was never from a standpoint of him directing me. It was him purely giving advice and counsel. And I'll never forget that.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. You know, John was definitely a servant leader. We're going to give it a chance now to see Admiral Currier's exit interview. And I'm told by the people that ran it is that he really didn't want to do this interview that much because he didn't like talking about himself. He really cared so much about others. But in John's early life, just to set the scene for this, John was a cop in Maine. And that's when he joined the U.S. Coast Guard with a lot of actually support and help from his wife, Mary Jane. And he and Mary Jane were newlyweds when they saved what little extra they had to get flying lessons. John wanted to fly. And only a short time after being commissioned and receiving his wings, John found himself saving lives under the worst possible conditions. And I might add that, you know, not taking anything away from the Monarch rescue, this was during daytime, and you know, we didn't have quite the gale-forced winds that John encountered, and he's going to talk about. So let's listen to the story from his exit interview in his own words.
So we went back into the air station. I remember shooting the instrument approach into the air station, and at 120 knots indicated airspeed, and doing less than 20 knots over the ground. So we came in and landed and taxied in the lee of the hangar to shut the rotor head down. And those guys were taken care of. And my wife was at the wardroom party. So when we got back to the wardroom, this is about 8 o'clock probably at night, she said, "You're not going out again, are you?" And I said, "No, there's no way. There's nobody's out there." Nobody's out there. You know, so about 3 o'clock in the morning, we got woken up by, you know, the RCC in Boston saying there was a scalloper on fire about 80 miles southeast of Nantucket. And the guys, the Terry T, they wanted pumps. So we launched. It was an interesting launch because it was still blowing about 60, I'd say, as I recall. Right. Dragged the helo halfway out of the hangar, turned it up because we couldn't turn it up in that high a wind. The danger of the rotor spinning up was too great. So we were partially in the hangar, and we turned it up, taxied out, took off, flew down there. IFR, it was severe turbulence. The crew was hanging on for dear life. we got down there. It was pitch black except for the lightning. And it was actually sleet. So we were concerned, I recall being concerned about icing a little bit. So we got down to Terry T and contacted them on the radio, and they were asking for pumps, and then the master came on about 5 minutes later as we were inbound. He said, we got a fire in the engine room, can't control it, I want everybody off. There are 10 of us. So we came into a hover, and I remember distinctly, we did an instrument approach to the water, and I distinctly remember turning on the flood hover lights and seeing the scene for the first time. And it was like, I don't think we can do this. It was 35 foot seas, about 60 knots of wind. The tops were blowing off the waves going over the boat, and the boat was dead in the water, so it was in the trough. So it was rolling more than rail to rail. It was getting green water over each rail as it rolled, and the bow was pointed to the right, so I had no place to go to hoist. So I remember telling Bob Hebert, this is one of his first search and rescue missions ever. His eyes were about this big. And I said, geez, Bob, I don't know if we can do this. So let's get him in the raft, and we'll have a better chance of taking him out of the raft. Well, we told them that, and they inflated the raft, and it immediately blew away. Just took off. And so we got in there near the pilot house and started taking them off. So we put the trail line down. We used to carry a trail line that looks like a water ski rope. We put extra weights on it. And we tried to use that, but it trailed after the helicopter in the wind. So we tried multiple weight bags. We tried several things. Nothing worked. I was getting a little concerned about fuel. So we used the anchor. It's an amphibious helicopter. As part of its kit, had a Danforth anchor that was about 30 pounds on a 1/2-inch anchor rope. So we used that as the trail line. It worked perfectly. Got it down. Unfortunately, they tied it off to the rail of the ship. Well, you're not supposed to do that, but they just did it. And we didn't know it at the time. So what we did was we used that anchor rope as the trail line. We got them off 2 at a time. But as we were getting ready to take the last 2, the master and the engineer off, the boat actually started to go down by the stern. Unbeknownst to us at the time, we were tied to the boat. So we had them up about 2/3 of the way in the basket, and the flight mech said, hey, we're tied to the boat, we got problems here. And the boat's not sinking real quickly, but it's going down. You could see it going down. So what we did was, we were in extremis. So what we did is, I went down from about 40 feet where I was hoisting to about 25 feet, allowed them to bring the basket into the door, and Dave Seavey, the flight mech, reached out and cut the rope with a knife. But we had to immediately pull power because the waves were now at the level of the helicopter. We were in the trough. So we got it back to Cape Cod, and the helo was banged up. It had some overstresses and things like that.
Your aide gave me a photo of one of the blades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got them anyway. We got them into Cape Cod, and it was a big deal. And it was daylight as we pulled in, but they were kissing the ground, pretty glad to be back. The Terry T went down, and never to be heard of again. So flash forward to, I don't know, I can't even remember what year it was, but it must have been around 88 or 89. I get a call from my father, who's a Navy guy, is proud, obviously his son's in the Coast Guard. I was stationed in headquarters, I believe, as a lieutenant commander at the time. He said, well, I was in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and I saw something with your name on it. How come you never told me about this? And I had no clue what he was talking about. He said, well, it's this Harmon Trophy thing. And I said, I don't know, but I'll, next Saturday we'll take a walk in and see. So brought my kids in, and we went in, and sure enough, there's the Harmon Trophy. I had to ask where it was, and found it, and there's a list of aviators on it, and it's got my name. Well, at first, I didn't believe it was me. I thought there must be some test pilot or something with the same name. And we asked the curators at the museum. They got out a book, and it was for this case. Now, how this unfolded was, I was selected by the board of the Harmon Trophy, who were elderly gentlemen that were kind of giants in the aviation industry, for selection, for award. This award traditionally has been given by the president. So just before the award was to be presented, Hinckley shot Reagan.
Oh,
And that completely destroyed the president's schedule around the time that was supposed to take place. And for some reason, it never got rescheduled. So it went into the ether. So when my father saw it, and I confirmed it, the guys in headquarters here, it was OAV, I think, at the time, the
Right,
aviation
sure.
guys, picked it up and ran with it. And they got the pterodactyls involved, and it was subsequently presented at the old executive office building by Vice President Quayle. But I had no knowledge for years that that even existed.
that's interesting.
It's
Fascinating.
my staff my staff's arranged to have that present at my retirement on the 20th. So
Okay.
it's pretty amazing. It's from the old days, but the people that are on it are like everybody that's anybody in aviation.
Sure.
So it's-
Lindbergh,
yeah, Wiley Post,
Wiley Post, Curtis LeMay,
Chuck Yeager, people
Chuck
like that.
Yeager. I mean, come on, that's like,
Really?
Well, Chuck, one of the things that didn't come out in the interview was that that wasn't the Admiral's first trip out that night either, was it?
No, sir, was not.
Yeah, he had participated in a couple of other rescues earlier. It was quite a rough night, and you can see quite a bit of his personality there. He was just very self-effacing and matter of fact. But Chuck, has any other person in the Coast Guard ever been awarded the Harmon International Aviation Trophy?
No, sir, and that's what makes it even more of a monumental achievement.
Well, and with all due respect to any Marine aviators that are out there, no Marine has ever gotten it either. So, it's a pretty special thing. John was active in the International Affairs Forum, and just speaking personally, when I called John to ask him if he would be willing to serve, he never hesitated. He simply said, "Sure, Mike, I've been looking for other ways to give back to the community." And that was John. His wisdom and his sage counsel are really, really sorely missed by this board. And John was also very committed to giving young people a chance. He wanted them to have the same chance that he had. And he loved Northwestern Michigan College, and he wanted to do something to encourage local students to consider careers in aviation. And that's why Mary Jane created the John Currier Scholarship for students who want to enter NMC's aviation program. So we've got another clip from Alex Bloy. Alex heads the NMC's aviation program, and he has some words to say about John and his commitment to aviation.
Hi, my name is Alex Bloy, and I'm the Aviation Division Director and Academic Chair at Northwestern Michigan College. 2021 marks my 20th year as a pilot, and I am proud to be serving the NMC community. NMC Aviation trains professional pilots for successful careers in the cockpit. Over its 5 decades, the program has trained thousands of pilots who have flown everywhere from the military to legacy airlines to the Alaskan bush. Today, NMC Aviation serves more than 150 students each year in both domestic and international exchange programs, and is also a recognized leader in the field of unmanned aerial systems education. The mission of NMC's Aviation Division is to provide lifelong learning opportunities, preparing the next generation of professional pilots for successful careers in a global aviation industry. In short, we help students achieve their dream of flight. As I've come to learn more about the amazing story of Vice Admiral Currier and Mary Jane Currier, it struck me that their humble beginnings in aviation mirrored what many of our students face today. Like many aviation families starting out, John and Mary Jane worked very hard to scrape together enough money for John to continue flight training. And in fact, John, one of the most highly decorated aviators of modern military, started out his dream of flight in a Piper Cub, almost exactly like the one our students venture out in each summer. While Vice Admiral Currier was noted and recognized for his transformational and servant-style leadership, Currier loved flying more than any other aspect of his work. For this reason, Mary Jane Currier established the Vice Admiral John P. Currier Aviation Scholarship at Northwestern Michigan College, so that others may follow their dream of flight. We are privileged to award this annual scholarship and honored that NMC is now part of the Currier Aviation legacy. Thank you.
Okay, Now it's time to hear a little bit from our audience. And I know we have members of the Coast Guard Aviation Association listening in, and we'd particularly like to hear from our pterodactyls tonight. But all of you can use the chat function to ask a question, or if you want, simply tell us about your own interactions with John. Okay, we've got a couple of questions here, and from the looks of things, several of them are going to go to Chuck. Chuck, how many cutters are there on the Great Lakes right now? Do you know?
Oh boy, starting right out with the surface fleet question for the aviator. How about that? So I believe there are 10. They're all work boats. And then of course, we have the Great Lakes icebreaker, the Mackinac, but I think the total is at 10. It's somewhere for sure. Okay.
Thanks, Chuck. Well, the next question is going to be designed to see whether or not you're prepared for flag rank. Is the Coast Guard prepared for duty in the Arctic Ocean as China and Russia expand their fleets there?
Boy, that's another good one. So I think if everyone just pays attention to what's going on, current events and in the news and what the Coast Guard's doing, we are trying to get more icebreakers for the Arctic. So that certainly speaks to a need that is out there that we do not have yet, but we are working diligently to get. With China's expanding roles as well as Russia, and trust me, I was well involved with this in my tour at NORAD and NORTHCOM. They're growing up there, and we have to grow also. Are we where we need to be at? No, but we are moving in that direction.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. The next one I'm going to take a stab at first, but I'm also going to ask you to weigh in here, largely because it really gets into the whole issue of U.S. policy, and in this particular case, probably Michigan policy as well. And the question is from Ann Montgomery. It says, how does the Coast Guard interact with the struggle to remove Line 5? And I'll start first by saying that as an officer in the military, our role was to implement policy as established by the federal U.S. government and not to make policy. So at this time, Line 5 is of course a real thing. Obviously, there are some very strong opinions on whether or not it should exist, both for and against. But I think what the listeners should appreciate is that the decision whether or not Line 5 will continue to exist is going to be one that will probably be determined ultimately at the federal level with a lot of input from the state of Michigan. But I will ask Chuck to talk a little bit about what the Coast Guard does to ensure that Line 5 is not breached. I know that if ships do the wrong thing, particularly dragging an anchor or something, it can create a significant problem and a potential. So why don't you talk about not just Line 5, but other infrastructure that needs to be protected, and the Coast Guard's role in ensuring that the boaters and shipping doesn't damage that infrastructure.
Yes, sir. I will kind of base it around Line 5 to cover some of those grounds. Fortunately for me, none of this falls in, it's not my bailiwick. This is all Sector Sault Ste. Marie that has to deal with it. And I have talked with their commanding officer about it and his concerns. One of the things the district is looking at is for the Straits of Mackinac, requiring actually qualified pilots that have to be on board the vessel to navigate through those waters to avoid any kind of those catastrophes. That is not in place yet, but that is being discussed. But with Line 5 and so much with just other pipelines and different entities that have potential for marine environmental pollution, the Coast Guard does exercises with them quite frequently, actually. And even under COVID, the Coast Guard figured out how to still do tabletop exercises and ensure that the commercial operators were holding up to their requirements, and the Coast Guard was still prepared. And with that, The one thing I will say, without getting any of the politics of it, the one thing that Line 5 has helped with all the attention on there, is there are other places that I know the sector commander is very concerned about that are probably, I won't get into it, but just as much risk with those, and it's allowed him to bring some attention to those.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. And I am reminded by one of the questions here, which is what is Line 5, that we have a lot of listeners that are outside of the Michigan region. So for the benefit of all of you, and you perhaps already figured this out from Chuck's answer, that Line 5 is a line that runs under the Straits of Mackinac. It is owned by a Canadian company, and its primary purpose is to move different types of fossil fuels. Ultimately, many of them end up over in Ontario again, but through the Line 5 provides the straightest shot for that to get there. So there's a lot of international issues going on and a lot of diplomacy. But I hope that answers the question for a couple of the folks that asked about what Line 5 was. We also have a note from Tim Sullivan, Rear Admiral Tim and Teresa Sullivan here. And I'm just going to read this because I think it's important that we realize that many of John's friends and co-workers are listening in. John and I served together in Cleveland, along with Mary Jane, as well as many other stations. I am but a simple sailor, cutter man, but he was by far the best officer, man, father, and gentleman I ever had the pleasure of serving with. Teresa and I remain friends with Mary Jane and can't thank you enough for this presentation. Semper Paratus. And for those of you who are not Coast Guard, Semper Paratus is Latin for always prepared. And I agree, Admiral, I agree entirely about your assessment of John Currier. Another one from John's son, Benjamin. Many thanks to NMCIF members, and in particular, Major General Lehnert and Captain Webb, for your time and effort in this impressive recognition of my father's legacy to the Coast Guard and the broader aviation community. So, it's great to hear from everybody out there that knew and loved John. I'm going to, I think that was about all the questions. I am going to probably close this here and tell you that if you've enjoyed this program and want to thank Vice Admiral John Currier for a life of service to others, please consider donating to the Vice Admiral John P. Currier Northwestern Michigan College Aviation Scholarship, as the Currier family and many others have already done. You're not going to be saving lives, but you'll be making a life infinitely better. We've provided the link below, and if you simply hit the donate button, all donations will go automatically to the scholarship. And we'll also keep that link up on the IAF website. Now, we're going to return to more traditional programming on the 18th of February when we invite Karen Greenberg to join us. Karen is a historian and an author. She is a recognized international expert on terrorism and national security. She serves as the founder and director of the Center on National Security at Fordham University School of Law. And she's going to talk about outlooks for the U.S. national security under a new administration. We hope you will join us on the 18th and that you go to the TCIAF website and take a look at the remainder of our exciting 2021 spring season. Thanks to all for being with us tonight. Be well, be safe. Like John, take care of those around you. Make the world a better place, and go forth and do great things. And thank you very much. We've got a couple of other notes here. I'm going to keep reading them here. Lovely tribute. Thank you, Mike and Captain Webb. It's from Ann McPhail. Actually, Ann was one of the people that suggested this in the first place. Thank you, Ann. We need to lift up people like John for making our world a better place. Thank you, Chuck and General. This is from Mike Parks. He's an incredible man who I've had the honor to serve with on many occasions, and he has taught me well and always invited us up to pick cherries. God bless. Thank you. And For all of you, have a great day, and thank you for joining us tonight. As I said, go forth and do great things. Good night.